Hey friends, Nova here, and today I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind for quite a while. That is, an analysis of Breitbart and the right-wing media sphere. No, not like that. Like this. The right-wing media sphere is a system of information, news, politics, and other creative content that espouses right-wing beliefs that range anywhere from moderate conservative to hardline nationalist and even fascistic outlets. Obviously, the former are just kind of annoying. But the latter are deadly serious and absolutely dangerous in the patently misleading or even entirely invented content that they use to spread their extreme right-wing ideology. The real terror of this graph is that the far right has a near monopoly on messaging, and their outlets are far more popular than the moderate or center right. I'm not the only one who's noticed this either. These charts are from a study by the Berkman-Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. They conclude from an analysis of cross-linking, social media sharing, tone, and content of popular news stories that the far right, and especially Breitbart News, has dominated the online political conversation. They also found that the right was far more insular than the left, which they attributed to what I'll call centrist both-sidesism. To quote the Berkman-Klein Center's press release on the study,
"There is insularity and partisanship on the left as well, but it is mediated by commitments to traditional journalistic norms, e.g. covering both sides. And so on the whole, the left got more balance in their media diet and less fake news, because they were more friendly to fact-checkers. The interest in balance, however, perhaps wasn't entirely good. Ferris and his co-authors found that the right exploited the left's journalistic principles."
I think that we need to understand that in reality, journalistic objectivity is often about palatability and pandering to a broad range of demographics, rather than integrity like the author of this release seems to think. To give their own outlets legitimacy and attract a wider audience, the more center-left tends to cite both sides of an argument, no matter how ludicrous one side is. This is how an outlet like Mother Jones, often cited as having a left-wing bias, ends up advertising for literal white nationalists. There's a problem here, and while things may have changed a bit since this study was done in a pre-Unite the Right world, before it became clear to a lot of people that this is basically this, and while more mainstream articles have noted our success in stopping them, there's still a lot to be desired here. The question these researchers don't seem to ask is, why hasn't the far left been able to make the same foothold as the far right? It's clear that centrist politics are falling out of favor, and that the extremes are becoming more mainstream by the day. Clearly, the left has more power in the streets, so why are our voices not getting into the mainstream narrative? The answer, in my opinion, is cold hard cash. Breitbart, InfoWars, TruthFeed, and the like, they don't threaten the owning class. They actually shift blame for problems caused by neoliberal economics servicing the rich onto already marginalized people. Someone like the right-wing's favorite buzzwordy dog-whistle billionaire, George Soros, only has interest in funding moderate left outlets like Think Progress, because farther left outlets actually challenge his right to be a billionaire. On the other hand, far-right billionaires like Robert Mercer or Roger Stone can fund outlets as extreme as Breitbart and InfoWars to spread absolute lies which lead to actual violence against innocent victims. But they themselves stand no risk of losing their power or vast fortunes. This means that far-left outlets have trouble fundraising, while an outlet like Breitbart has received at least $10 million in grants from Robert Mercer. I could do a lot with that money, personally, but that's not even half the puzzle, especially where Mercer is involved. I'll get to that soon, though. In any case, since Breitbart is a major hub in this graph, I'd like to take it as a sort of case study for what's going on here, and to do so, we'll be examining its key figures and origins of its ideology. To those who don't know what I'm talking about, Breitbart is a far-right news outlet. It's notable for its audacity in making patently false claims with highly emotional headlines. A quick look at Snopes shows dozens of completely fabricated claims that are easily debunkable and yet highly viral.
George Soros wants to destroy America. Black Lives Matter stole funding from vets. Scientists are in a conspiracy to lie about global warming. Illegal immigrants started a mass wildfire. Planned Parenthood is in league with Satanists. Violent immigrant mobs attack peaceful picnickers. Refugees are spreading tuberculosis.
Almost all of these stories are entirely fabricated, and the rest are radically misrepresented. Many times the liberal center will call this stupidity or ignorance, but I have a different idea. Rather than these stories actually being about news, they're about a kind of rewarding emotional reaction, centering on outrage and fear. They serve the purpose of reaffirming and justifying existing bigotries, while giving the reader a sense of moral superiority. Breitbart is attacking not at the level of consciously held beliefs, but creating routines in which the readers practice certain ways of thinking and feeling that encourage anger and violence at the expense of marginalized people and political dissidents. But we don't have to guess about their intentions in doing this, because we have their internal memos. Here's a fun one between Steve Bannon and Milo Yiannopoulos.
Dude, we are in a global existential war where our enemy exists in social media. You are jerking yourself off with marginalia. You should be owning this conversation, because you are everything they hate. Drop your toys, pick up your tools, and go help save Western civilization.
Message received. I will do a week of Islam next week.
You don't need that. Just get in the fight. You're social media, and they have made it a powerful weapon of war. There is no war correspondence in the West yet, dude. And you can own it, and be remembered for 3 generations. Or sit around wasting your God-given talents, jerking off your fan base.
God, imagine being a literal villain's henchman, and your boss types like Ketty the Penguin of Doom. Also, just 3 generations? We're not gonna aim higher than that? To really get the outright fascism being openly incorporated into this platform, though, you really do have to read the whole BuzzFeed article on it, which I link in the notes. But what I'm interested in is this one particular thing that Bannon says to Yiannopoulos concerning his long-form article introducing the alt-right.
I need to go through this tomorrow in depth, although I do appreciate any piece that mentions Evola.
Who is Evola? Bannon is referring to Julius Evola, a literal member of the original Italian National Fascist Party, and founder of the self-styled school of fascist mysticism. His ideas have been highly influential on the alt-right and include concepts of mystical and spiritual racism that are deeply at the heart of fascism itself. His work is particularly focused, especially after the defeat of the Fascist Party, on forming basic assumptions from which fascism can grow, by telling esoteric and mystical stories that can train people in certain ways of thinking and feeling. This is called operating on a pre-political level, because it circumvents people's knowingly held political beliefs. There's no need to convince you to accept Mussolini or even know anything about fascism. given the proper conditions, fascism will reinvent itself from the features of the culture it is planted in. Evola's goal was to plant that seed and water it. Andrew Breitbart was fond of saying on this subject, culture is downstream from politics. This is pre-politics at its core. It's unclear whether he was directly aware of Evola, though. In this whole game, Breitbart is easily the least scrutable figure. He not only founded Breitbart News, but also helped found the Huffington Post and the Drudge Report. His own views seem to have been decidedly apolitical until the early 90s, when he read the works of Camille Paglia, specifically Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson. Camille Paglia is a social critic who claims feminism and liberalism, but is in reality very hostile to both. You can easily see from the title of the book that she's deeply concerned about decadence, and, well, if you don't know why that's a far-right dog whistle, you should watch Natalie Contrapoint's video on the subject, linked in the upper right. Sexual Personae pitches itself as a guide to Western art history, but it holds deeply fascistic philosophical ideas that are very close to Evola's concepts of fascist mysticism. According to Paglia,
eroticism is mystique. That is, the aura of emotion and imagination around sex. It cannot be fixed by codes of social and moral convenience, whether from the political left or right, for nature's fascism is greater than that of any society. There is a demonic instability in sexual relations that we may have to accept.
Yes, all her work is like this, and no, she never justifies her claims with anything more than pithy remarks and vitriol aimed at people who disagree with her.
That if you find me ugly, then you don't understand that I am woman as she is, okay, and you are a sexist, okay? I'm sorry, no, you are just a big pile of pudding.
Anyway, she posits that human nature contains within it a powerful, chaotic, and chthonic, or earth-based, force that is deeply threatening to civilization itself and is inherent within feminine power. According to her, culture and law were created by men to contain the source and to protect civilization as we know it. This seems like some fairly weird and esoteric nonsense to most. But like I've mentioned, the pre-political is about encouraging certain ways of thinking and feeling, about setting base assumptions rather than attacking consciously held political beliefs. The point of these esoteric narratives is not to describe something that's true. Rather, they explain exactly what would have to be true for what they're doing to make sense outside of just raw self-aggrandizement. But the will to power is absolutely all that guides these efforts. Also, this quote,
Neo-Foucauldian New Historicism is a high-wax bowling alley where you score points just by knocking down the pins.
That's how bowling actually works. That's literally how you get points in bowling. Has she never gone bowling? How did her editor not catch that? Anyway, a lot of her assumptions and ideas went into Breitbart's work. Breitbart would launch his website in 2005, which he conceived of as the Huffington Post of the right. Initially, the platform was an aggregator that was designed to bring together negative stories about Hollywood, liberal news media, government social programs, and other parts of society that were considered liberal bastions. This brings us to the next mystery figure involved in Breitbart News, Robert Mercer. Mercer is a reclusive billionaire known for donating millions to conservative political campaigns, but he's also given at least $10 million to Breitbart News and is a part owner. Mercer doesn't say a whole lot publicly, but some accounts of things that he's said to employees and friends are enough to raise eyebrows in even a conservative crowd. According to David Magerman, probably said that wrong, a former colleague, he once said, "Your value as a human being is equivalent to what you are paid." And by definition, teachers are not worth much because they aren't paid much. Recently, Mercer's name has been in the news a little more than usual. There are allegations that he's responsible for a massive bot swarm of millions who are inflating Trump's follower pool and spouting talking points at people who question him. He's also the founder of the now infamous Cambridge Analytica company that has been the focus of a high-profile scandal. There are pretty strong allegations that Mercer has been using the company to meddle in politics, and that it may have been instrumental in Trump being elected. According to Vox, Cambridge Analytica has combined social psychology with data analytics. They collect data from Facebook and Twitter, which is perfectly legal, and have purchased an array of other data about television preferences, airline travel, shopping habits, church attendance, what books you buy, what magazines you subscribe to, from third-party organizations and so-called data brokers. They take all this information and use it for what Nix calls behavioral micro-targeting, basically individualized advertising. The strength of this modeling was illustrated by how well it could predict a subject's answer. Kosinski continued to work on the models incessantly. Before long, he was able to evaluate a person better than the average work colleague, merely on the basis of 10 Facebook likes. 70 likes were enough to outdo what a person's friends knew, 150 what their parents knew, and 300 what their partner knew. More likes could even surpass what a person thought they knew about themselves. Combine this kind of predictive power with an army of bots, and you've got a potent propaganda tool. One person controlling 1,000 bot accounts is able to not just affect the people in their immediate circle, but also potentially the algorithm of the site on which they are operating. Mercer met Breitbart shortly before his death, while attending a conservative conference where Breitbart was reportedly just this fiery speaker about how conservatives would never win unless they took back the culture and took back the news media. Mercer was convinced by the speech and offered to invest $10 million in Breitbart's news platform. I should note, Mercer is very far-right, but he isn't a fascist. He's just a so-called American libertarian and thoroughly terrible person. In the same year, Breitbart died of a heart attack, and Steve Bannon ascended to the head of the company, making Mercer his sponsor. Bannon is a weird guy. He's openly quite reactionary, and has espoused completely fascistic beliefs. As we saw before, he is a fan of fascist theorist Julius Evola, but it goes beyond that. In his two documentaries, Generation Zero and Torchbearer, he outlines a view of societal potential that is deeply capitalistic, nationalistic, and millenarian. His views are syncretic of anything that can give him moral authority, for instance, celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. for his statement that human rights are based in Christianity. I might add that since this, the Christian nationalist group Patriot Prayer has begun to use images of Martin Luther King Jr. in their propaganda as well. A mainstay of Bannon's ideology is a cyclical theory of time as presented in the book The Fourth Turning. His interpretation is particularly militant and apocalyptic. According to Time, Bannon has clearly thought a long time both about the domestic potential and the foreign policy implications of the fourth turning. More than once during our interview, he pointed out that each of the three preceding crises had involved a great war, and those conflicts had increased in scope from the American Revolution through the Civil War to the Second World War. He expected a new and even bigger war as part of the current crisis, and he did not seem at all fazed by the prospect. Bannon believes that there's an inexorable struggle between the West and the East, which will inevitably lead to an apocalyptic final battle. He believes this struggle is necessary to settle the crisis of capitalism that started in 2008, and that the following era after the war will be like the post-war high of the 50s on speed. This does not follow. If we entered a world war right now, we'd hyperconsume resources that are dwindling and accelerate global warming, even if no nukes were ever used. Everything he does is about preparing America for this final crusade, and he really thinks he's doing what's right and necessary. He's absolutely wrong, and frankly needs some sense slapped into him.
Violence, decadence, political anarchy, moral decay. Welcome to the city of man.
Sounds like a good time, to be honest.
When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see these events, more to come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse.
To those who don't know, the Duck Dynasty dude was reading Revelations, but he reads a part that's explicitly a dog whistle. Behold a Pale Horse is also the name of a book that advocates for a meta-conspiracy theory that ties together three popular but distinct reactionary myths: the anti-Semitic Jewish banking conspiracy, the Illuminati conspiracy, and the millenarian myth. The last one is the one being referenced by this trailer, which is clearly pointed at Christian fundamentalists. According to How to Overthrow the Illuminati, a book about debunking conspiracy theories, many Illuminati theorists also talk about the end of days and the mark of the beast. These terms come from a religious movement called Protestant millenarianism, which arose in the mid-1800s. Millenarian movements believe that the end of the world is coming and try to get ready for it. Millenarians in the 1800s developed a complex timeline describing the second coming of Christ, with a sequence of important signs. One of the signs was the coming of the Antichrist. In the Bible, the Antichrist is sometimes described as a single person, and sometimes as many individuals or groups. The Antichrist is supposed to gain dictatorial powers over the world just before Christ's return. Today, many U.S. evangelical Christians are constantly looking for signs that the Antichrist is appearing. The Antichrist has been everyone from Hitler to Stalin and the atom bomb and, well, Obama. No matter how many times the world fails to end, the millenarians persist. Torchbearer is clearly meant to mobilize these people against anarchists and other liberatory forces, like Miley Cyrus. So let's recap. Andrew Breitbart read Camille Paglia's work, got inspired, made a website. A weirdo billionaire named Robert Mercer funded him. He died immediately after that. Steve Bannon, who expressly is the fan of a literal fascist named Julius Evola, took the reins, put that money toward a culture war that was a bit farther right than Breitbart probably intended, but has been effective nonetheless in pushing that line. The combination of bot accounts spreading links, sensationalism, outright lying, and a whole lot of money has been the fuel for the success of Breitbart News, and ultimately the initial wave of the alt-right. This is why we can beat them in the streets, but haven't taken the mediascape. Lying doesn't work for us, and we don't have the resources to create bot swarms or start an analytics company to hyper-target potential allies with our propaganda. Steve Bannon isn't with Breitbart anymore, and the new management has done their best to wash his stink off them. They're gonna need a lot of soap, though. There seems to be a trend in figuring out which far-right media outlets can take off. Each needs their own resident eccentric bougie. Robert Mercer for Breitbart, Roger Stone for Infowars, and Richard Spencer for altright.com, to name a few. The fact that they can substitute dollars for real support, and that no one seems to be able to hold them even halfway accountable, is just another sign of how corrupt the capitalist system is. The owning class would rather hand the MAGA phone to these fast trash hoo-haws than see their fortunes voted away. How can we respond to this? Well, I'm personally calling for the creation of a far left-wing media sphere. To do this, we'll need to be able to distribute work as much as possible. We can't afford to have dozens of wage workers keeping things running smoothly, nor would that be desirable. Anarch.info is my response. The site is a simple little WordPress aggregator, but as we've seen, that can be powerful. I encourage everyone who's doing any kind of activity at all to open their own outlets to self-report. If you do, please send a link of your site to autonomize@anarch.info. You can also post articles you write to itsgoingdown.org. That's it for this month's Informant. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and give me money so I can buy a camera and better microphone.